Okay. Recording should have started, I believe. This is the February 20th, 2024 Rook community meeting. So let's do a quick checkup on some of our previous releases where we have been doing and will be doing patch releases. So I don't think there's anything to talk about for 1.12, at least. Let's take a quick look at the board there just to make sure there's not anything outstanding or nothing of note that we are aware of, right?
Yeah, I don't believe there's been any blocking issues since our last 1.12 release, which was about, I think it was just after the couple of previous community meetings. So it's been close to a month probably since that last one. But I don't
Yeah.
know of any other issues besides some CI fixes and things that we backported in case we
Yep.
needed to release.
Yep. So yeah, so let's move on then to the 1.13 branch. And a couple days after the last community meeting, we had our 1.13.4 patch release out. So let's see if there's anything major to mention there.
Yeah, maybe I'll just mention a couple of them. Removing CPU limits from all the pods just so that the pods will be more free to burst. Um, there's the and some other ones that blocking PDBs, unhealthy PGs appear. I guess I don't need to read through all of these, but it's a good um, bunch of fixes there. Um, yeah, one thing we had since that last release was a bunch of CI fixes needed because there was a change to GitHub Actions. We discussed that, I guess, in the previous community meeting, but that's all resolved now. And good to have a green CI again. There's just a few days of rocky CI.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely helps with feeling confident with our changes. All right. Well, that's good then. So let's see, since we'd be planning on a regular cadence of patch releases for 1.13 with the .5 in a couple days from now on Thursday, I suppose. Let's see, take a look at the project board and see what's outstanding or what might be important there.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any real blocking issues for this release either. Has to just be the 2 week cadence to get the next release out with the latest things we've merged. Yeah, you like that
I
ancient
like the yeah,
version of
do
Prometheus?
ancient 0.40.
Yes,
Yeah, that is
um,
multiple years old, huh?
I think so. Yeah.
Funny. All
So
right.
yeah, there's a PR for that. It's really more of a documentation issue than anything. So, but yes, it will be good to have that updated.
All right. That sounds good then to me. All right, then those are the yeah, okay. Those are support for the last two of the supported releases. So let's then look at what's upcoming in 1.14. It's decently
Mhm.
through the milestone now, so we're getting closer to the back third-ish or so, I guess, right? Um, so yeah, this project
Yeah.
board is I expected to see more in the done column for this, though. Are there a
So
few things that we that we haven't added to the
right,
milestone yet?
right. We haven't been diligent about adding all the issues that are getting fixed in this release either. It's with so I got it later in the agenda, but updated the roadmap after the last community meeting and opened this project board just a couple weeks ago and started getting the features in here to start tracking towards that release. Um, so
Are
yes, we
any of
need to do
these,
more updating of this board.
that's totally fair, Travis. Are there any of these that you would already kind of in your mind are classifying as like blocking the release? Like this is critical, this is super important feature.
I need to read through those. Yeah, the all of those things. I mean, I'm not sure any of them would be blocking the release, but I think if they're in progress and getting as we get closer, I'll definitely want to look at moving them to in blocking or blocking release to consider what's critical. But
Hmm.
I mean, typically we have a pattern of, well, if a feature is not quite ready, let's not force it in. Let's wait till a dot release to include it. I feel like these features are all in that category of not really blocking.
Yep. Yep. And yeah, and then
For a second here, the last item in the first column and under to do is something that I picked up and started working on, but it has now basically come to a hold for some time because of other work priorities that took over basically. So I've started working on it, but it's a longer discussion and it has been changing directions. I will continue on it when I find the time for this. So this last item is basically something that will take some more time, but I'm planning to finish it at some point.
Yeah, we have about 6 weeks till the release, so hopefully there's time in there.
So the most honest state will probably be in progress or on hold if we can create another column.
Yeah, I'd say the to-do column is also considered on hold or not progressing at least.
Yeah, thanks for the progress so far on it, Michael.
Good.
All right, so in terms of the timing then, a little bit more than a month. So the end of March is when we are talking about cutting the release branch, getting like the release candidate build out as well to start a week's worth of baking and testing there. Yep, so when does that's like the week after KubeCon Paris, right, Travis, if my internal calendar is synced correctly?
That's right. Yeah, so
Yep.
that's
Okay.
KubeCon is what, around the 20th.
Yeah, 19th,
So-
20th, 21st, something like that.
Right. So in previous meetings we talked about, well, maybe early April we'll get the release out. So just a few minutes ago, I looked at the calendar again. It's like, well, how about if we target the first week of April? Yeah, that means we create the branch a few days before that, and for that beta.0 release to start with testing and things. But I think that way we can. Well, I'll be on spring break the week of KubeCon, so after we're back from a spring break and KubeCon, then we'll really focus on getting the release out.
Yep, pick up everybody, come back together and converge and converge on the release as well.
Right.
Sounds good.
That's my thought, at least. Is there any other input on that timeline or blocking features to consider? And we can talk more about the features in the roadmap in a minute, but
Yeah, just a minute.
So, okay, I guess we'll go
All
with
right.
that.
Yep. So that timeline seems reasonable, Travis. Yeah, and then so yeah, before we move on to the general roadmap, then a patch release then planned. It's not out yet this week for the plugin.
Right. So I think, where are we with that? Is there anything else to merge? I think maybe something else still in progress, and then we'll get the release out.
I don't think there is anything holding or pushing us back from releasing. There are some couple of PRs opened. Those are related to improvement, but nothing holding us off from Z release. I'm just
Okay.
occupied with some other items, so I'm not able to focus on releasing this. I'm hopeful that by next week, yeah, I will able to do the release.
Next week is more realistic. Yep. Sounds good. Yeah, I think there's no real blocking issues for that patch release. It's just we've got a few fixes, so it's a good time for release.
Well,
Maybe
let me
we
take a
could
note of
target
that then.
next to like put the 27th as a tentative date.
Excuse me, I just
Sounds
had one thought I wanted to mention for this. So the 0.7, 0.8 looks so timid as a version. When are we planning to do some 1.0 for this? Not yet, probably.
That's a good question. Yeah, I feel like the plugin itself is stable, honestly, and I guess with a CLI tool, is there any reason not to go for 1.0 soon, or should we just go? Honestly, with Rook originally we just went 0.8, 0.9, 1.0. We just kind of naturally let that that progression hit the versioning. So we might consider the same for this, or we could jump to 1.0 soon. I don't have any real strong thoughts on that. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree. It's pretty stable and has a good feature set. It's extremely useful, this plugin thing. So at some point we should have the courage to call it version 1, I guess.
Yeah, I totally
My
agree
feeling
with
is
that.
it wouldn't be too far out from today.
Yeah, I mean, I guess in the Kubernetes world, I don't see that it's uncommon for projects to sit at 0 dot something for even a very long time. Like Kubernetes as a like greater community, like the CNCF community takes the like semantic versioning very seriously, as well as like API compatibility. And I think as soon as we are like very confident that we don't like need to make breaking changes, we can feel like we can go to 1.0. And I also don't think it's a weird thing for users to see something that's a 0 dot something, right? It just means that they might have CLI commands that change or change their flags or change their format. And what the 0 dot, whatever gives us is we can actually pivot without overextending ourselves to like make things backwards compatible.
Yeah, right. Well said, Blake. I think a good point in time to go to 1.0 would be after adding a next bigger feature to the plugin. That kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I think the time to do it is when Shubham is like feeling confident that the API is stable and that we are really unlikely to have like breaking API changes. At what point can we start, saying we support this for people who are going to use this in their own tooling, right? Like the 0.0 effectively means people like need to be using it there, like attended. But once we go 1.0, people are gonna, feel more confident, and like that's kind of like our promise that they can use the commands that we have in their own unattended tooling.
I'll say that
Yeah.
my feeling on this generally is that it's fine to bump the major version anytime there's a breaking change. I think it's kind of weird that things get stuck with 0 dot for forever when there's not a clear indication to the end user when there's actually been a breaking change. I think it's much better to just bump the major version. And who cares if the major version gets huge? That's sort of my take on it. I mean, people will already be depending on this in their scripts. And they have no way of actually knowing when there's been a breaking change.
Yeah, indeed. And I think there's a well-defined description of what the semantic versioning really means with those major, minor, and fixed version. So if we are adding another major feature also to this plugin, and after it has landed and has been tested, I think that will be the time to call it 1.0. Because even now, I would already call it pretty feature complete for what we want from it, and rather stable. And afterwards, the semantic versioning will basically tell us when we can and should bump those XYZ version numbers. So yeah,
Regarding
that's exactly what triggered
how
me.
stable
Sorry, Shubham, go ahead.
regarding how stable the tool is, I have not seen any critical issue from a user, or at least in the issues. So I think we are pretty stable, and I think we can follow what Rook did in the past. Like we can go 07, 08, and 0.9, and then bump to 1 dot until we have something, we are pivoting or we have some breaking changes, something like that.
Right, exactly, Shubham. So let me make one suggestion here. There was this one open thing we wanted to add command line completion to the plugin command. And that seemed to be a little more difficult than originally anticipated. I think once we add the command completion, the tab completion, then might be a good time to call it 1.0. Otherwise, I completely agree with what Joshua said before, which is what triggered me to make the remark in the first place. Staying too long on version 0 or something sends the wrong message to the community, I think. It appears to be too timid in my mind. Anyway, we can't solve this right here and now. We can continue discussing this offline, I guess.
And just to add on the command completion, so we we depend on the kubectl community to add the command completion for crew, and there are some major work being done regarding bringing all the crew plugins command to directly with kubectl. So I don't think we can directly add the command completion with the crew plugin. But if we want to use the tool as a standalone binary, then we can obviously add the command completion.
I'd agree. Let's not block that feature. It's kind of external to our plugin, it feels like, because we want to keep using it as a plugin.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the priority.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I do have one other thought here, which is I haven't looked at the documentation recently, but I want to make sure we have a process for strongly identifying which versions of Rook are supported by the plugin. I think once we go to 1.0, and especially once we get to like 1.0 dot, you know, something that's like getting closer to the Rook releases, at least in my experience, when I see two related like packages and their versions are close together, I get like the implication that these are versioned together, and I want to make sure that we can at least like spell out for users like the versioning of this tool is independent and unrelated to the Rook version. And we could even kind of like dispel any confusion by just, you know, jumping the CLI straight from 0 to 2, which would be like sort of weird, but might help with like some amount of confusion if users think that they need to match the kubectl plugin version to the Rook version.
Yeah. Well, with the kubectl, usually you just request the latest, or you say update it, and I don't know how much users pay attention to the plugin version, but it's a good question.
Yeah, right. And regarding what Rook version the plugin support, we don't have anything hard documented. But I think that's a good point that we can add a maybe one-liner note that whatever the Rook supports, like I think the major, I think the -2 versions, right? So yeah, those versions are supported in the tool. But yeah, currently today we don't have anything specific that okay,
Right.
we have this matrix of support.
Yeah, I'm thinking of like there was the time when we added support for debug pods, and that was an effort where we changed Rook and we changed kubectl plugin. So there is some sort of like version attachment. I think we just haven't like explicitly stated what it is, and we do probably need to do that for like actual like official releases.
I kind of like what kubectl does. If you run version, it will warn you saying that my version is more than ±1 of the actual API server version. Like if you're using the version that's out of sync, you could probably do something similar so that you could have a version check, or even just a general warning in your face if it thinks the versions are out of sync. I mean, you should be able to look at something. fish that version out.
Right. Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah,
idea.
that's a good idea, I guess. So just having something like kubectl Rook Ceph and then version spit out the plugin and the Rook version that is currently used. And then maybe warn if there's a discrepancy for the supported version. Or just a silly thought. Maybe just encode the supported Rook version in the plugin version. So call it 1.13 if we support Rook 1.13 and newer also. That's not really serious. But I repeat, we can take the serious discussion to conclude on this offline, I guess. I don't want to take too much time in this, unplanned time in this community meeting for this. It's just a spontaneous thought that came to my mind because it was mentioned.
Yeah, but it seems like there's decent alignment amongst the group in terms of, what does it mean to be V1, which, there's obviously going to be follow up on to kind of understand or get a good sense of, a confidence level for ourselves of the stability of the APIs. And then, helping the adopters of their users of the tool to be able to have a good sense of what versions it can target and be compatible with. That's another thing we've captured from here too. So two good discussions around that I feels like we don't have majorly wildly dissenting opinions here. So it seems like there's some alignment, which is good. Cool. Okay, awesome. So then let's keep that the agenda flowing then to the next one here. After these milestones, the milestone checkups is done. So Travis, you went ahead and updated the main roadmap as well.
Right. Yeah, you want to click on that doc just to mention a few of those features that we'd like to get into the 1.14 release. And yeah, so we've got so allowing this setting the application name on a set block pool, that was for the purpose of being able to for the next feature, which is having object stores share the same pools and using Rados namespaces to make that happen. That feature request has been around for a while, and hopefully we can finally get that one in to this release. I started taking a look at that a couple weeks ago, but next one, let's see, replacing a single OSD when the metadata device is configured with multiple OSDs. So we're looking at that one, and should be doable. Santosh, I don't think Santosh is on the call, but he was looking at that. The default service account for all Ceph daemons, Parth does a PR for that we're about ready to merge. Just a nice to have to make sure everything, or we're not depending on the default service account in the namespace. The Rook Orchestrator Manager module, then we want to enable by default. We're just dependent on the next Ceph release, the next reef, which would be 18.2.2, which hopefully will be out about the same time as our 1.14 release. And we've got the option to run all components on the host network. Yep, Michael mentioned that one previously. Hopefully we can get done. There's Multis enabled clusters for a holder pod deprecation. Blaine, anything you want to mention quickly about that one? Just probably take a few releases.
Yeah, just that. Progress is going slow because we're trying to really make sure that we have development environments that are gonna closely simulate what users are doing and make sure that we're able to provide good quality instructions and guidance for users and not just sending them into a free-for-all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty fundamental change to this networking. So, okay, and then a smaller feature request for the CSI image tags that was nice for the Helm chart. And then Ceph CSI will be at the V3.11 release, and I don't recall all the features they have planned, but we'll pick that up with our release. And then build support for Go 1.22, which, yeah, Subham started looking at that, but it was also failing when we tried in the CI, even though it built locally. I think Subham said so. Those
Yeah.
are the main things, but yeah.
Yeah, on
comment
my
about that?
system I'm using 122 Go version, but somehow it is failing on CI when we are doing make build.all, which build for multiple architecture. So I have not started looking to the CI issues since 122 is the very latest release. So probably in a week or something, I will start looking.
Yep. Okay. And then a few things that'd be nice to have for the kubectl plugin in the time frame too. We'll see about this. Okay, that's all I've got.
Yep.
Any comments or questions about the roadmap? Thanks for everybody's contributions.
Yep. And I think most all of these are on the project board as well, too, Travis, right?
I tried to make sure they were, but I better double check later.
Cool. Okay. Well, with that roadmap discussion completed, I think that was everything we had on the agenda. At least, is there anything that folks wanted to add before we call it a day today?
I have, I guess maybe two things. One is I thought we had a ticket for it, but I guess not. One feature that I have long wished for is a way of managing NFS exports that is not dependent on CSI. So I maintain a lot of NFS exports that are not using the CSI driver. They're used completely external to the Kubernetes cluster. And so I have to script setting those up. And I thought there was a ticket for it. And I just looked and it doesn't look like there was. But it would be great to have, a CRD for that, configure NFS export, something like that. I don't think it would be that difficult to do. I'd be certainly willing to work on it if somebody else would pick up the ball for doing the design work.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting to me, I have to say. So, because having worked on the on a separate project, which is the Samba operator, configuring the SMB file service Samba on top of Ceph or other storage, that is basically, we've also created CRDs for that. And there we don't send around the server instance, but around the share corresponding to the NFS export. So the object here is the export. And I was wondering, could we make the management of NFS with Rook more natural or lightweight by managing exports as the central object to be done here? I think I hear that's what you're saying, basically.
Yeah. I just want to.
I'd
I
be
want a
happy to
CRD
get
for
engaged into discussions about that.
Ceph NFS export. Here's the path.
Right.
Pretty simple would make me happy.
Sounds good. I'll happily get engaged in more discussions about this.
Great.
Future.
William,
You'll
did you
open
have
an
something to
issue
add
for
to
that,
that?
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I am curious to hear more, and some of that can be offline, but yeah, I mean, historically, we did look at the Samba operator when we were starting to try to add more Kubernetes native ability to create exports, and we made the decision that probably doing this with APVC would end up being the better solution. I mean, that doesn't mean that it is the better solution, but this is something that we actually have thought of. And my bigger concern with going the route of CRDs now is confusion that users may have in like when to use CRDs and when to use PVCs, and like can PVCs use CRDs, and it's more about like explaining to users like the complexity of all of the options that are available. I think it would be good to first explore like, are there things missing from PVCs that like you need, that you could still use those to accomplish what you're trying to do. I just like, I don't want to like put us in a position where we have to like redo CSI stuff that is already complete, or have a really hard time explaining to users like these things aren't compatible, because I mean, at least my experience is that no matter how much documentation we add, people just don't read it. Like they just come and they're like, how do I do this? And it's like, it's there in the documentation. So yeah, I don't like, I'm not trying to give a no, but I do want to like clarify the like overall concerns I have just adding more complexity.
You're saying
All right.
because creating a PVC basically creates the export and manages the export at the PVC level.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, my experience is that like if you give users one way to accomplish a thing, it's like it's very easy for users to comprehend. It's very easy for like developers to comprehend and explain. But as soon as you give like two tools to achieve the result, the same, like effectively the same result in two different ways, like it becomes much more complicated to explain to users, to document, and to like maintain. And you know, what we have is already like reasonably complicated. So I just want to make sure that we're keeping those things in mind as well when we're having future discussions about this and considering like the ripple effects.
All right. I mean, does this work without the PVC being used? You can just create the PVC resource and it will create the export without it being actually mounted in a pod.
Yeah, that is one of the things that we did like think of and consider. So this, a lot of PVCs are only like fulfilled when they're actually mounted to a pod. But in this case, an export is created based on the PVC regardless of like consumption.
All right. And then it's possible that my ignorance that this was workable like this, this might actually fit my work use case. Let me play with it, and then maybe I can take this offline with you.
Yeah, I'm also like very happy to like try to identify any like kind of gaps in the, I mean, they would be CSI features, but any gaps there, like if there are fields that you need, like we can work on adding those to the to either the PVC request or probably more likely into like the storage class that gets used. Just so there are like more parameters that like, you know, maybe you want.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. And then I had one other weird thing, and that is I've mentioned this on Slack. I'm not even sure if this is a bug, but I've seen this multiple times. So I've been screwing around with Fleet for deploying Rook because I'm now up to, I think, 16 Rook deployments, and it's becoming quite painful to have to manually update them. And part of this has been thrashing of resources. So Fleet will hammer, you know, as like a Ceph NFS or Ceph object store. It will update it several times, even though there's like no significant change, but like annotation changes or something that's added on. And the generation and observed generation will go out of sync. And I'm still trying to decide in my mind if this is a bug or not. But what'll happen is uh, the operator will think everything is completely converged, and the generation will be like 3, and the observed generation will be 2, and it will be stuck like that until I manually kill the operator. I mean, I've waited days to see if it'll ever actually decide that it's synced, and it won't. Kill the operator, and then when it comes up, it will sync. And trying to go through the code, that makes sense to me for the behavior. But what I've also seen is like the generation is 4, and the observed generation is 2. Killing the operator will only increment by 1, and I can't even figure out how that's possible in the code. So I don't know if this is just like an operator pattern bug, or if this is just don't do that. I don't know. It's not a big deal. It's just weird.
Yeah, I think I actually probably know the behavior that's causing this. I think it is actually a Rook thing that's happening. Yeah, I'd be really happy to talk more offline. I'm also happy to like give a like short summary here as well.
Yeah, this is like I said. This is really actually. It's not a blocker for me. It's not a major thing. It's just a weird behavior that I've seen, because obviously the thing that was triggering this is something that shouldn't be happening. But it's weird, and I don't understand why it does what it does.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think there's kind of like an implicit promise that a CRD makes if it says, you know, if it has an observed generation field, you expect those to match up. And I also don't think it would be a wild idea for users to like have some sort of like Prometheus alert that says like these things have been out of sync for X number of hours.
So Fleet does that. Fleet keeps track and says, "Hey, the resource." It actually reports it as progressing, but it says that they're out of sync, and the warning stays for forever.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably what that is there is like in the controller runtime predicate for most of our resources, we have a check for if like the deep equal of the spec hasn't changed, then we just don't reconcile. Which if, you know, Fleet is just updating annotations to, you know, go between version like 1 or 2 and version 4 of the CRD, then Rook is just going to say, well, we're not going to enact any change here, so we might as well not reconcile. But that's definitely also meaning that these generations can get out of sync. So possibly, but or probably Rook should just like go with the generation. Like I think there's also like a built-in predicate you can use that just says like, you know, only reconcile if the generation has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the behavior that I would expect is probably that if things are in sync, that the observed generation and generation are set to be the same, right? So if the operator looks at it and says, well, there's nothing to do, then it should just set the observed generation to be the generation period, even if no reconciling took place.
Yeah. Yeah, I think to do that, like the predicate is not the place to do those kind of updates. So but the reconcile loop is, so that like logic might have to move into the reconcile loop, but is definitely like I think a behavior that even if it's not like breaking, it is still like not quite to what Kubernetes, what like users are expecting with Kubernetes like CRs.
Okay, well, that makes me feel better, because I was thinking I was a little nuts. Like, why am I not seeing this like all over the place? So,
Where was that, just a Slack discussion, or where is that issue? Just to
I
take
had
it
not.
offline on
I haven't even opened an issue. I mentioned it on Slack, I think, a few days
Slack.
ago.
Okay.
But
Right.
I mean, if this is something that we feel that Rook should do, then I'm more than happy to open an issue, and I'm even happy to do some legwork on sorting it out if Blaine just wanted to point me in the right direction, because I dug through the code and I couldn't see where it was going wrong.
Yeah, if we could follow up on that issue. That sounds good.
Cool. Well, yeah, Josh, thanks for sharing your observations. No pun intended there. It's yeah, useful to see both of those in the feedback as well. So cool. Okay. Anything else for folks before we call it here? All right. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for everyone's engagement here and discussion. Definitely very useful. Good ideas and feedback all around. And then we'll get some patch releases out later this week and keep on working towards the 1.14 release at the end of next month. All right. Great to see
Sounds good.
everybody today.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
See you.
Take
Good day.
care.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good one.